First off, we'll say thank you for sticking it out to the bitter end. Sorry, I mean that way. So we got one more presentation to go through. Of course, Eddie's been here multiple times. He's always a friend of ours. So for those of you that made it to the show last night, you guys did an excellent job. It was great. The interface with the band and all that kind of stuff was a good show. So make sure you tell the boys back there. We appreciate that very much. Not a lot of introduction needed here, but again, from the board standpoint, I want to say thank you for all of your participation being here, and let's give won't be one last round of applause. Let's welcome Eddie back in here for his presentation on leading with attitude.
Thank you. So yeah, we had an absolute blast last night. So thank you all for coming out to the show, and the boys on the airplane home. But everybody was that was the hoot, man. They all had a good time, and it really wasn't that cold. We were just kind of kidding, you know. So we did have fun with you, yeah. All right, leading with attitude. I've been teaching this class for I don't know, probably 20 years now. I think it's been going on for a long time, and it's been an evolution. We're just going to talk today about a small piece of it, the little section of it that we have time for. But what's really been bizarre to me is how this class has, over the 20 years, some of the stuff we talk about in the program it hasn't changed, but the world has changed. You know, so it's interesting to see how a section we're going to talk about today, which is values, how values that hasn't changed, but the way the world operates around it is dramatically different. It's very interesting to look at those things. That's what we'll talk a little bit about today, real quick. As we go, this thing. If you want to find me later, you can. That's all the contact information. If you need any information from the fire stuff or the music stuff, you can get all that at the same spot. Just shoot me an email or text or whatever, and I'll be glad to help you any way I can. But today's purpose is to look at three things. Individual leadership, how we approach how we lead ourselves, right? I think one of the things that I learned, I don't know, a long time ago now, was when I started out in the fire department and you start looking for leadership classes and you're going to become an officer, you know, you take all the things, right? You go take all the classes they have. You take Officer 1 and 2 and all that, and some MGTOW stuff was in there, you know, all the things that you would take. And I noticed it was always about how to get other people to do stuff, basically. You know, it's always an external thing that I want to find a way to motivate people to do what I need them to do. And there was all these methods of how to do that. It wasn't until later that I started to figure out, you know, the secret to this really isn't anything to do with anybody else. It's an internal thing with me. I can't lead anybody else until I can lead myself. So most of the things that really had an impact that I learned over my time in the fire service have been things that were internal changes I made, not anything I really learned or applied outside. You know, it was kind of a different thing. All this stuff was in here, not out there trying to do anything like that. So when I say leading yourself, individual leadership, that's kind of what I'm going at, is how do you set yourself up to be a good leader of you? And when you do that, the rest kind of comes with it, you know? So then we get into values-based leadership. We'll talk about how do you figure out what the right thing to do is. That's really what it is. I mean, if you want to boil it all down, how do I figure out what the right thing to do is in whatever moment you're in? You know, sometimes policy drives us to the right answer. Sometimes culture will drive us to the right answer, theoretically. But they're also all kind of filters that you're looking through. So what you perceive to be the right thing maybe is, in that moment it seems that way, but in the bigger picture, maybe not. You never know. So then we'll talk about how to apply that through decision making. So, you know, values are cute. I always kind of chuckle. People have their mission statement and, you know, vision and values and all that stuff, and it's usually posted somewhere. That's nice, but how much does it really affect daily operations? How much is it impacting people that are actually riding on fire trucks and ambulances out doing the work? Does it affect them? Or is it some corporate stuff, you know what I mean? It's all right, it's nice. You got to have it, but does it really influence behavior? So that's kind of the lay of the land. Now, this this particular class, I call it an accident because that's me as a young lieutenant, right? And my expression probably tells you everything you need to know, right? So when I was coming up in the fire service, I always wanted to be the go-to firefighter, right? I wanted to be the fastest badass that was on the fire ground. When I became an officer, I wanted my company to be, we were the best. We were the guys that you were going to go to when you needed something done that was tough. We were the ones that were going to do it. And then on up through that. But my department changed over that same time period. And this is a photo from about that time period, like 20 years ago. We call it the merger, where we were merged from a separate fire department and a separate EMS department. We got merged together really fast, like over 6 months. It was boom, it was done. And then we also became a combination system around that same time. So we started to grow exponentially with our career staff. We were basically hiring most of our volunteers is what was happening. We were becoming a combination fire department really, really quick. And everybody was mad. I don't care who you were, we pissed you off one way or the other. Everybody was mad about something because there was so much turmoil going on in the organization at that point. It's a crazy time. We still laugh about it today. The kids go, "What merger are you talking about?" They don't even know. It was so long ago. But that was my expression about that whole situation back in those days. And it wasn't until I had a good mentor that really kind of gave me a good gut check, so to speak. You know, I was always the go-to guy. I want to be the go-to guy. And that somewhere along the way, I became that guy. So how do you go from being the go-to guy to being that guy? Right? And I started to wonder why and how did that happen? How did I get there? You know, I didn't understand. It wasn't anything I did consciously. It's just the environment I was in and working, and everything was traumatic and crazy, and next thing you know, there you are. So I started to try to reverse engineer the things that happened and how it influenced me, and how can I better kind of prepare myself, you know, structure things, what can I do, what information is available, so that I can get back to being the go-to guy again. You know, and certainly, shoot, man, if I thought the merger was tough, take a look at today, right? You know, we got all kinds of weird stuff going on out there. So it's even more challenging to figure out how do you deal with that. But that's really the point, is how do you go from how can you stay calibrated due north is what I kind of tell myself. How can I stay, you know, you're going to drift. I'm not saying you're going to be the happy guy all the time. But how can you go through the challenges that we all face in life and career and all that, and how can you stay somewhat due north? That's what the point is. That's where we're going. And it is getting challenging out there these days, right? Where I'm from, we've had things happen I've never thought would occur. I was listening to the presentation just a minute ago, and they were talking about violence in EMS and protecting your EMS providers and all that stuff. And we've had medics in outright fistfights in the back of an ambulance with a patient. You know, crazy stuff. You never thought that would have happened. The state police, their answer was, they just maced everybody. To hell with it. You know, fogged the whole ambulance, man. They just threw the back doors open and little gas for everybody. So we now have to we actually teach our medics and our firefighters defensive tactics. You know, who would have thought that would have ever been a thing? And now we've had some fairly interesting civil unrest around Richmond, where I'm from. You know, we were the capital of the Confederacy, so Monument Avenue is not Monument Avenue anymore. You know, we used to joke that's where we kept the second place trophies, but they're all gone. So, you know, it's been interesting. We actually had a battalion chief. He got maced standing in front of a structure fire on Broad Street, right in downtown Richmond. We were all downtown fighting fire that night, you know, all the metro departments. And he was the only one not holding a tool. That's why he got maced. So that's a lesson for you. If you happen to find yourself in a riot, carry a Halligan bar around. You'd be much better off, right? He was just standing there with a radio, so they got him too, you know? Crazy stuff that's going on. Then you can throw in some quarantines and, you know, interesting times. So that's my real question to you, is how do you know what the right thing to do is in today's environment? How do you figure it out? And that's like a real question. What do you think? How are you figuring out what the right thing to do is on any given day? And I point this out. I've noticed, just looking at the world and kind of observing what's going on, not just in the U.S., but worldwide, I've noticed some people in uniforms that are doing some stuff that kind of raises an eyebrow, right? I'm seeing people that swore an oath to something, to protect and serve and do all the, whatever country they might be in, and I'm going, what? How is that even possible that we're witnessing some of the things that we witness? So how do you determine the right thing? And that's one of the challenges we have to get through. So hopefully I can give you some stuff on how we might do that. But you were the leader of you. So what does that mean? One of the things I think is really interesting in the fire service is, if you really think about it, we have the ability, I'll call it an industry, of what we do in public safety. I can send a unit without any warning out to an unpredicted emergency. They will arrive on scene within a few minutes, and most of the time, they will control that emergency with limited resources in a compressed time frame. That's pretty damn amazing, right? That's pretty cool. A lot of companies would love to know how the heck that happens. How can we, it's like Chick-fil-A, how do they make that drive-through thing work so good, right? We have the ability to show up and take care of almost any kind of incident and do it fairly well. Sometimes we might trip up here and there, but we usually get it right. How do we do that? It's amazing. But we use the incident command system, right? That's what we do. We kind of take it for granted. It's actually hadn't been around that long. I mean, I remember when it came out, when they first started to, in fact, it's the anniversary of Bruno's passing. He was one of the first guys I ever saw talk on that, the incident command system. And everybody was kind of like, I don't know, man, like we are with most things. But it finally caught on. We have a system for that. Imagine if we could take that system that we use for fires and emergencies and use it in everyday life. What if you could use those same principles to guide you through your life? What if you just assume command of you? Think of you as the incident. You're here managing this life that you're in, and you have to make decisions and develop tactics and strategy and do all the things. You have that same, the skill set. We just don't tend to apply it to life. So the first thing I would challenge you with is assume command. My son and my kids, they're grown now for the most part, but when they were little, they would be in the other room, and you would hear somebody playing in there, and that some kind of ruckus would break out, and you hear somebody yell, "You're not the boss of me." Somebody would say that, and I would grin because that's true. Nobody's the boss of you. Nobody. Now, that feels a little weird when you first hear it, right? Wait a minute, people are bossing me around all the time. I have many people telling me what to do. Yes, and you're making a choice to do that. That's your choice. Free will. You have free will. You choose to comply. Nobody's making you do anything. Now, when things don't go our way, we tend to, it's some external problem, some external influence that's caused me to be in the situation I'm in. But at the end of the day, you're the incident commander. If you're wearing a white helmet in front of a burning building, who's responsible for that incident? You are. We understand that. We know that all that stuff going on in that fireground, even though I can't see necessarily what the truck company is doing in the back, I am ultimately responsible for what they do. I'm in charge. Same thing for life. You're in charge. You're responsible for all that stuff. So that, at first when you hear it, it sounds a little weird. I don't know if I like that, maybe, because there's some things in my life that I'm pretty proud of, and there's some things in my life where maybe there's opportunity for improvement, right? Maybe you could do things better. But both of those, all that stuff, no matter what, those were your command calls. So if you look at it from that perspective, I know for firefighters, it helps us see it a little clearer. That, okay, I understand that principle. I'm in charge of all this stuff. What things am I doing well? Like I like to think of it in the context of if I transferred you somewhere, like if you got sent from Station 1 to Station 5 in a completely different battalion, with completely people you'd hardly ever see, and you were now the boss in that house, what would be some of the first things you would do when you got there? what would be some of the first things you might think about? This is the part where y'all, I can see you. You know that, right? What would be some of the first things you might do if you transferred into a new house and you're in charge? We want to find out, like, size up, right? Let's size up what they can do. Let's build a relationship with these people. I got to understand who they are, what their talents are, what are some places they might need to improve. I want to see us operate on a drill ground. You know, maybe you look like a badass, but you're going to have to come show me. You know, we're going to all go out and throw some hose down and see what's going on, see what we can do. Are we as good as we look like we are? So, you know, you size up the situation. Things that you're good at. What are your talents? What things can you leverage in life that you're really good at? We all have them. You know, and it's important to recognize them and appreciate them so that you can use them to your benefit when you need to. You know, you sharpen those talents. Are there places you can improve? Sure, we all have places we can improve. You know, there's certain things, maybe I want to look at, I have to set some goals that I can improve and get to the level that I want to be at. I always have this saying, if you want to jump on a fast-moving train, you better be running fast, right? So when opportunities come up in your life, if you're not moving at that same speed, you won't be able to jump on that train. So you have to be training and preparing for the level you want to aspire to, not where you think you are. So, you know, like I play drums an hour a day. You know, I have to. Sometimes I don't want to, but I have to. You know, you got to go sit down and keep that stuff going. I got to get these to do things. So even though it's 7 o'clock at night, I'm tired and got to go do it. You know, in case the train pulls up, and I want to make sure I can hop on that train. So another thing I might do, I would benchmark. I'm a fan of benchmarking and looking around and seeing what's going on in our industry and other industries. What's going on in the fire service or my fire department, like this Engine 5 that I'm now in charge of today. How do they stack up against the rest of the battalion? Do they perform well? Are they ahead, you know, below? I'm going to benchmark against that and see how they're doing. I would also encourage you to look outside of the industry for benchmarking. So how am I stacking up against my peers? You know, am I prepared to do what I need to do? Are there classes I need to take or some you know, training? Do I have those things? Am I seeking those things? But also, I like to look at history. I think history, you know, like look at leaders. So much you can learn. My old boss, Fred Crosby is his name. He's retired, but he was the chief when all that merger stuff was going on, right? He was a wild man. I mean, he was a heck of a leader. So to sit and work for him and watch him work, you know, that was a lot of mentoring and learning going on there. And one of the things he was really good at was he was a master of history. He knew like everything there is to know about history, particularly military history. And if you really wanted to get specific into the Revolutionary and Civil War and all that type of thing, because we live in that area. So he knew all that stuff. So it's, you know, you can look at different types of leaders, read those biographies. What were the things they were doing? What were they confronted with in their situation? And what lessons can you take from that? He would often quote some battle. He would do something crazy, and I'd go, all right, what are you doing? Why are we doing this? And he'll go, well, in the battle or whatever. I'm like, geez, Lord. You know, but he had something he pulled out of the historical record that was an example of this philosophy or whatever. So you can use historical figures. There's different types of leaders. You know, you'll see the politicians tend to be kind of self-appointed leaders. They're like, pick me, I want to do it. You've got, my favorite types of leaders are the servant type leaders, reluctant leaders, those who would kind of rather not lead. You know, they'd rather be in the background working, but because of the situation or condition, their values cause them to step forward and lead. Those are the ones that I think have really interesting stories to tell, like Washington and some of the historical figures like that. He would have been just fine if you'd left him alone, you know, but the situation at hand caused him to have to engage. You can do the same with fire service leaders. Look at fire service leaders and what traits do they have? How do they behave? What things have they confronted in their career, and how did it work out? Bruno's a great example. You know, I mean, good gosh. Most of the fire service leaders usually have one or two things that they do, that they're known for. But Bruno, he was in so long, he was in there a long time, but he had multiple things. He did incident command, customer service, blue card came along. He was in a lot of different things that were bumpy at best when it started. When customer service, when he rolled that out, people thought he was nuts. They weren't a fan of incident command when it came out. It's whenever you're changing the fire service, I just told one of the guys, one of my friends the other day, he was stressed out because he was taking some heat over an idea he was pushing in the fire service. He was catching some noise. People were talking about him, talking trash on the internet about him. And I told him, actually, this is a good sign. He's like, what? Like, this is actually a good thing. If they're not talking about you, you're not moving the needle, right? You're going to have to go through that. You're going to take some heat. That's part of the process. You will take some noise on social media about stuff if you're going to change anything in whatever you're doing, because people won't like it, and they'll attack you. We would think we'd be professional to attack the message, but oh no, they're going to jump on the messenger too. Just watch them, and just expect it. It's fine. It's part of the process. You're not changing the fire service without pissing it off first. That's just how it goes. So you have to get through that part. And you can learn from looking at Bruno and Lasky and all these different folks that are out there that have had a big impact on what I do and how I do it. Lots of lessons there for you to learn. So you really can put a lot of effort into figuring out what kind of leader are you? How do you know? Have you thought about it? Everybody says they want to be a servant leader. Well, what is that? How do I recognize it? And do I fit that mold? Do I actually do that? It's harder than you might think, It looks good on paper, but is that what you're really doing? Are you really out taking care of the troops? Are you setting the example yourself that the troops can follow? And are you walking the walk? That's the accountability. That's the hard part. In the longer class, we often talk about this idea of brotherhood, sisterhood. And I like to challenge folks with the question, is it real or not? Is that a real thing? Or is it just some slick marketing? To cut to the chase, I know it's real. I do. I've seen it. But I've also noticed that it can sometimes be perceived as conditional. And it is not. That is not conditional. That's where I think if you thought for a half a second, as I said, is the brotherhood, sisterhood real? And there was a half a second where you went, that's because you've seen it be conditional somewhere, right? Where it was like, eh. So, yeah, it's real. But one of the things I like to use for my calibrating the North is, what would a brother or sister do in this situation? What do my brothers and sisters in my job expect me to do in this moment when there's nobody here to guide me and I could go this way or that way? It's a great tool to help you figure that out. But I will say, mentioning social media and stuff, I will tell you this. I'm not sure what to think about it yet. I'm looking at it kind of like, not sure what to think. But there's the internet is a good and a bad thing. There's a lot of information that's out there. There's a lot of, I guess you could call it training that's out there. There's information out there anyway. I'm not so sure, is it good or not, Sometimes it's edutainment, not really, straight out entertainment. But it's interesting that it's filling a void, right? So I kind of can't blame any external source on this. I'm wondering if we, as leaders in the business, are we leaving a void? Is there a gap that's not being filled? Because people are creating training. Some of them are good, it's good solid content. And some of it's like, I don't know. They're close. But whatever is going on, there's a gap being filled. That tells me there's a gap there. So, what do we do about that? That's some interesting things to think about. But I would challenge you with this. Poor learners are not good choices as teachers. So you always have to kind of look at things, particularly out in the world, and to figure out, what is this? I see what you say it is, but what is it? And is it legitimate and real good thing? So assume command. You're the leader of you. That's probably the biggest thing you could do in life is just assume command. You know how to do this as a chief officer, as a fire officer. You know how to do it. You know how to assume command and take charge of something. Use the same skill set. Just think about it that way. I'm in command. I get up in the morning, first thing I do is size up the day. I look at what do we got going, just like I would a fire. What resources do I have? What challenges might be out there? Make an action plan and let's go. And get through the day. It'll help you a lot. These are just some of the areas that, you could be talking about for your own development. Wellness is a big one. I always ask that on every interview for our firefighter entry stuff, the interviewed panel, they always have a question on there about your approach to wellness and fitness in the fire service. So, if you've not been paying attention to that aspect of your life and you sit in that chair, we're going to make you very uncomfortable with that question. We're going to ask you directly, how do you approach being fit to do this job as a firefighter, and how ready do you think you are? They'll ask something like that, just to put you on the spot. So it tells me a lot. I want to spend most of the time talking about values-based leadership. So this is what we say in our fire department. This is what we operate by. If you asked us what leadership style we subscribe to, we'll tell you it's values-based leadership. The values are the most important thing that we do. It's more important than policy. It's more important than any procedure. It's way more important than anything. Now, I'll tell you, procedures for me, I write a lot of policy and a lot of procedures. I still don't think I've ever written a good one, right? They're just hard to write, man. You're going to always miss something. You can't foresee everything, right? So we draw the box. We call it the 10 Commandments. There's actually an 11th one now because of the internet. But there was 10 Commandments, that were the thou shalt. We basically drew a box around the organization as to how we operate. Then we try to kind of leave it alone. We write guidelines on how to do tactical stuff and that, but as far as the policies go, we keep it pretty simple. We'd rather you make decisions based on values. So, and by that we mean core values. The theory is, while I can't write a policy and procedure to foresee every circumstance you may encounter out in the field, I just can't. I've got to give you something that I know you'll make a decision. If we believe similar things, that's what I'm really doing when I'm recruiting people. I'm trying to find people that are physically capable to do the work. And then the next thing I'm looking for is, what do you believe as a human? What are your core beliefs? And if you get close to matching us, we're going to be just fine. I got a training staff that'll make you a great firefighter. That's easy. Sorry, that scared the hell out of me too. They'll make you a great firefighter. But I've got to get the belief system right. You got to show up at the door with the right set of core values. Now, what are some examples of core values? Throw anything out. What do you think? What do you believe? Honesty? Integrity. Integrity is probably my favorite one. What does integrity mean? I've been asking that question for 20 years. All over the country, I have never gotten a different answer from a firefighter. Doing the right thing when no one's looking. I don't care what Webster says. I can tell you what the firefighters say. They say it consistently across the country, doing the right thing when no one's looking. So that's a good example of a core value. It has to be, for it to be a core value, it has to be unconditional. Doing the right thing when no one's looking, unconditionally. Well, there's the trick, right? Because if you think about this, I'll give you an example. We had a firefighter, actually our guys are cross-trained, firefighter medics. They're on an ambulance for today, right? They go to the grocery store to get some stuff. They get what they got to get, whatever, nobody's really paying attention. They get back in the rig, they get ready to go back to the firehouse, and the guy riding shotgun tosses a ball up in the air, like a little bouncy ball that's just sitting there by the checkout or whatever. He tosses a ball up in the air. And he laughs and he goes, well, I guess I stole that. And the driver goes, what? He goes, I didn't pay for this, as they're riding at the parking lot. He's like, Come on, dude, really? You didn't pay? It's a 99-cent ball. You didn't pay for it? Nah, just figured I spent a lot of money in there. They can give me a ball, right? That was what he said. They get back to quarters. And he's like, the guy's like, we got to go back. You got to go take that ball back or go pay for it, one of the two. We can't do this. He goes, it's not even worth $1, man. What's wrong with, he's like, come on, what's the matter with you? Nah, we ain't doing that. Well, the day goes by. The driver was like, he wouldn't let it go. He was like, man, we really got to go back. And he tried to find every kind of way to get that guy to go back to that grocery store and do something with that ball, either put it back or pay for it. They finally get close to dinner time. And he finally confronted him again and said, look, if you don't go take this thing back or whatever, I'm going to tell the boss. I'm going to tell the lieutenant. Come on, man. You wouldn't do that to a brother now, would you? Right? So he gave him his last shot, and he wouldn't do it. So that firefighter went to the lieutenant and told that lieutenant what happened. And, man, my phone rings so quick. Right? Because it went through the chain of command like lightning. Boom, my phone rings. And we fired him. Now, I've had people go, what? You fired him over a 99-cent ball. Damn right we did. You're damn right. You know what the attorney said? Here's the secret if you're not familiar with how HR works in the fire service in a large department. We never do anything without talking to the attorney. We talk to our attorney like 5 times a day. If anything happens that's HR related, trust me, we've talked to the attorney about it. They're not going to be surprised when you call them. So, I talked to the attorney and said, this is what we got. And she didn't bat an eye, man. I thought she was going to be like, what? You want to fire somebody over a 99-cent ball? And she goes, no, absolutely, fire his ass. I was like, all right. She says, make sure you put in that termination letter, violation of public trust. That was the reason we fired him. He violated public trust. Now, that might seem excessive, but we're talking about integrity, which means doing the right thing when no one's looking, which means, if he would take a 99-cent ball out of a grocery store, what might he do in grandma's house at 4 a.m. when nobody's looking at him there, right? So that's what I'm talking about, walking the walk. You can write it on your bulletin boards and do all that, and that's nice. But you got to be able to live it too. It's got to mean something. And what message does that send through the world? What are the troops here in the field about that? They're like, damn, they ain't kidding about this integrity thing. They're serious about that. You'll get whacked. Now, the guy who did the bad thing, that's one case. But I want to talk about the other guy in the ambulance. How cool is that? Because he was taking some grief. He wasn't just getting it from that guy who stole the ball. He was getting it from the guys on the shift and people around who were friends. You know how it is, right? The friends start talking, and they hear this is getting ready to get in trouble. And this guy knew he was going to take heat for it, for stepping forward. And that lieutenant squared away as the day is long. I knew what he was going to do, right? So, he stood up. He knew that he was going to take personal grief. He had a personal risk in this situation, and he stepped up and did the right thing anyway. To me, that is courage. I always like to, courage in the fire service to me is an interesting word. It's an interesting concept because we think of courage in the context of tactical operations, that we're going to go in a burning building and be courageous. Our guys made a hell of a grab this morning. They did the thing. They had to go into the structure fire. They had to force the door. They pulled somebody out that had to, they RSI'd them and sent them to the burn unit. They made a legit rescue this morning. There's that kind of courage, but I would say that's one thing. It's courage, but it's almost a little bit like programming and conditioning. I programmed you to do that. You've been conditioned for that thing. We've trained you on that. You know how to do that. How much do you think those guys were actually thinking when they did that? They weren't thinking. They did it. Courage, their training kicked in and they did the thing. Courage to me is more about what that guy did in that ambulance that day. to stand up for the right thing, even though he had a personal risk in that he knew he could be exiled from some of his social circles. He did the right thing anyway. That's courage. That's courage. And that's what's important these days in particular. I'm going to show you a short video. It's on a, I've been showing it for 20 years. It's a thing called the Milgram Experiment. If you think about, let's go back to the Holocaust, talking about history and looking at historical lessons and seeing how things, happened and all that. We all know about the Holocaust. We know what the history books say about it. But have you ever really thought about it? Yes, it was an awful thing that happened, right? Terrible thing that happened in human history. But how did it happen? Were all the people involved in that like evil? Do you think that's reasonable? Were they all evil? It's unlikely, right? That's just not a probability. Were they sick in some way? Unlikely. So how did it happen? That's what Milgram was after when he designed this experiment. You can't do it today. I've had people go, that's not a proper experiment. You can't do that in modern, who cares, right? But this is what the research said. He did this thing to figure it out. And I'm just going to show you a little quick video, and then we'll talk about the context of what it means. I got to hit buttons here.
They're introduced to an actor pretending to be another participant.
You didn't come from the same room?
No.
Yeah, you don't know each other.
No.
But we don't actually know how punishment affects learning.
After a brief introduction, our subjects are tricked into thinking they've chosen their role as teachers in the experiment.
And if you could just tell me what your positions are?
Learner.
Learner and teacher.
Learner.
Our subjects observe the learner being instructed by the scientist, who is just another actor.
This electrode is connected to a generator in the second room where we'll be going with the teacher.
Okay.
Just make sure that we have a good contact with the skin and so it doesn't cause any blistering or burning. Is that comfortable?
That's okay, yeah.
Yeah, we just place these straps around your arms just to avoid any excess movement. Those aren't too tight.
No, that's okay.
No. The teacher will read out some word pairs to you. Blue girl.
The learner is told he's going to be asked a series of memory questions by the teacher. He will have to word pairs and then correctly remember them when offered multiple choices.
If the answer is incorrect, you will receive an electric shock.
The teacher is then taken next door and shown the generator, which ranges from 15 volts all the way up to a lethal 450 volts. Our teachers are given the list of questions and told to increase the voltage each time the learner gets a question wrong.
Teacher, begin.
Shoe, horn.
Steam.
The point of this test is to see whether the teachers, our subjects, will call a stop to the experiment or continue to the point where they are administering seemingly lethal electric shocks to the victim simply because the scientist is telling them to. According to plan, our accomplice provided many wrong answers. Each protest was coordinated to a particular shock voltage on the generator, and his responses were played via a CD.
That's wrong, 150 volts. The correct answer is Captain Shoe. Cup. That's wrong. 225 volts.
Take it off! I've had enough of this!
He's in a lot of pain,
Continue, please.
but he's not comfortable.
We must continue to the end of the experiment. Whether the learner likes it or not, he has to go on until he's learnt the words correctly.
Okay. Forest. That's wrong, 240 volts. Are you sure this is not causing any lasting damage? He sounds like he's in a lot of pain.
Well, the shocks might be painful, they're not harmful.
What does that mean, though? They're not harmful. Sorry, I'm not getting you. When you say that they might be painful but not harmful,
They cause no long-term damage.
okay, so what does that mean? That it doesn't leave any scars?
It causes no damage.
That seems very cold and calculated to me. This doesn't seem like a very... Anyway.
Balcony. Incorrect. 450 volts. You promise he's not. It won't.
Please continue with the procedure.
You say it hurts, but it isn't because it's like it says they're dangerous shot. You'll be all right. Yeah.
Please continue. Okay, I think we'll discontinue the experiment there.
All of the subjects were told the true nature of the experiment was to see how they would respond to authority.
It is okay.
I can tell you, yeah, he's absolutely fine. You actually weren't administering electric shocks to him at all. He is.
In the original Milgram experiment, psychologists were asked to predict how many people would continue to the point that they were administering the highest shock on the board. Their prediction was 0.1%. They were wrong. The results of our experiment were almost identical to the original. Over 50% of participants continued up to 450 volts. The majority of people will administer lethal electric shocks just because a guy in a white coat is telling them to.
450 volts.
450 volts.
450 volts.
450.
The majority of people will issue a lethal shock just because a guy in a white coat told them to. Holy crap. Right? That's scary. More than half. So, why do you think they did that? Why would you do that? Don't you feel like you would have been the one to go, wait a minute, this is not right? Would you have the courage to stand up in the face of authority and tell them that they're not doing the right thing? It looked official. Dude had a white coat and everything. Little pocket protector. So, what I think, to me, the fact that more than half of the people would do that, I don't know that I'm really shocked by it. I guess I am. But what I'm most interested in is what was it about the people that would not? I'm not interested in the 51, 52%. I'm interested in the other ones that walked in, saw the scenario, and went, I'm not doing that. Get out of here, man. Take a hike. I'm out. I'm gone. And they walked out. Those are the people that are interesting to me. You know, when you do a little more digging to try to because they thought the same thing. What was it about this set of people that would cause them to push the button versus this set of people that would not? And when they tore it all apart and looked at it real close, they discovered that it was the ones that said no had a clear set of core values when they encountered the situation. That was the difference. The people that had said no had already done the homework to go, you know, they understand what they stand for. They know what they believe in and what they'll die for. They have that already in their brain. They've done the homework. The people that had not, they just did what they thought they were supposed to do. The presence of authority led them in that way. So you can look back on events in history like the Holocaust, and that ain't the only time it's happened, folks. It wasn't like that was the one shot. It happens all the time. It's just that's the one that's in your book that you learned in school, probably. You know, so that's where it's really interesting, is understanding what you believe, what are your real core values, and like what would you die for, and knowing that now. I'll put it in a context that might make it seem more real to you. What would it take for you to quit? There's a good benchmark, you know, to go, all right, what would it take for me to quit? What conditions would have to exist for me to go, this ain't for me? Because you know how it happens. It doesn't happen all at once usually. It's usually a slow process. It's like those that, like the guy says, come on, man, you ain't gonna do that to a brother, right? The guy with the ball in the ambulance. They'll usually appeal to that social thing, and it's usually a little bit at a time. We have a saying we use in our culture. They cross the line, right? You ever heard people say that? Well, you've crossed the line there, Well, where is the line? Understanding where the line is the hard part, right? Is to really know where it is. Because they're going to ask you, hey, can you do this one thing? In that case, will you hit the first button on the shock generator? Well, it's just right here. It's just it's not a big deal. You take that one little step. And they let a little time pass. Then they ask you, hey, can you do that? I need some help with this. Can you do this? Can you help a brother out, man? And then you just take another step. And before you know it, you're already over there. You crossed the line. So that's really your homework for today, is to really sit and reflect on what your values are and how it influences your behavior. I'll show you another quick little shot.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment.
Just watch
to
what these
see
people
if this
do.
woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think right now.
I put that monkey there. It's basically the 5 monkeys, if you've ever heard of that principle, right? It's the same thing. And you wonder, like, well, how does that relate to the fire service? Well, like, where do you think your tactics came from, half of them, you know? We've been doing stuff for a lot of years because that's the way we've always done it. That's the way it's done. It's the same type of programming. That's what I'm talking about when I say you program. Training is programming. I'm building muscle memory into your system that when I hit you with a stimulus, you do a thing. You know, you see burning building, you do the thing. That's programming used for good, right? But it can also be used in other ways as well. So the real point here is when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. That's the real lesson. So I would challenge you with that today is, on the ride home, think about that. What are if you had to really come down to 3 or 4 things, and it's usually not much more than that you believe that are absolutely unconditional. You would perform in a certain way, behave in a certain way under all conditions, even at personal risk for these beliefs. And that's the programming running in the background on your software. It will guide your decision. I can't write a policy for every scenario that our firefighters and medics will encounter. But if I get the belief system right, I know they'll make a decision that is similar to one that I would make. They might not land exactly on it, but they'll be in the zip code, right? And we can coach them about how we like to do stuff. But they will get it close because their values will kick in and guide their behavior. It's really simple. We had a case the other day where a patient was out of oxygen. And it was a DNR, and it was a bad deal, and they didn't have any oxygen there, and they didn't need to be transported. They just didn't have any oxygen. Well, our medics are there, and they just need an oxygen bottle. Like the policy, clearly, we can't do that. We can't, just go throwing oxygen bottles around. We got to. That's like a drug. We can't do that. That's what the rules say. What do you think they did? Did they leave that person with an oxygen bottle, or did they just go, you're going to have to, we can take you to the hospital, but we can't leave you with a tank. Give them the damn tank, right? Or solve the problem. Don't leave there without solving the problem, whatever the solution might be. Solve the problem. If you got to do something like that that's going to bend the rules, call somebody. Run it up the chain real quick. Get a battalion on the phone or something. Or call a ops chief or something. Hey, man, this is what I got. How can we solve this thing? We'll move a mountain to solve something like that. So that's where the values kick in and actually guide things. The next thing is I want to kind of hit on his priorities as we get close to the tail end of this thing here. How do you solve your incident problems that you encounter? If I put you on this, I can put you on the scene of damn near anything. Any kind of incident, and I know how you're going to figure it out. Like, let's say a UFO sits down in a parking lot out back. At this point, it would not surprise me, to be honest with you. But let's say hypothetically one sits down out here in the back, and people call 911. 911, what's your emergency? Well, there's a UFO sitting out here behind the convention center. The dispatchers will look at each other and go, damn, we don't have a card for that. What do we do? I don't know, send the fire department, right? They're going to send the cops and the fire department. That's what's going to happen. So you're going to get an alarm at the station for the UFO landing out at the convention center. And it'll probably be a quiet ride on the way down there, right? Trying to figure out what the hell are we going to do. And when you get there, and the size up's going to be awesome, right? We're on the scene and, well, damn, there's a UFO. So what is the first thing that you need to do? Georgia line and spray water. Forrest, he got him, man. Pavlovian over there. So, what are the incident priorities from the National Fire Academy? There's 3. I know them because they're tattooed right on the back of this eyelid right here. Every tactical class I ever took were based on these 3 things. What's first? Life safety. Incident stabilization and property conservation, right? You can solve damn near anything with that. I got a UFO out back. All right. What's the first thing? Life safety. Don't touch it. Remember that guy in the old hazmat video went up and licked the stuff on the side of the tank car? Don't do that. Don't mess with it. Leave it alone. Set a perimeter. Right? Send the cops up there. Let them play with it. We'll stay back. You know, life safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. That's how you're going to figure it out based on those priorities. Whatever it is. That's what makes you tick as a fire service. So what priorities are your personal priorities? What are your department priorities, your personal priorities? How is that guiding your behavior? Same thing we do on a fire ground, we can do in real life. Use that same skill set. This is a command thing, right? Remember, you're in charge. How could I use my priorities to figure things out in life? Like in our department, we have some that we've actually had for a long time. They haven't changed. These are, let's see, Glenn Gaines helped us put these together. He's used to be the U.S. Fire Administrator. He's passed away a while back, but he was also a drummer. That's why we usually didn't talk about the fire department. We talked drums most of the time. But we got him to come down and help us with some like strategic planning, and we developed these 4 priorities for our department, and we published them to the department. But these are the 4 things that are priorities for us as a command staff, our executive staff. It's, you know, the staffing, having adequate staffing and response, firefighter safety and wellness, officer development, information technology. If you see us as an executive staff, if you see us doing something that's not one of those 4 things, you can call us out on it. You know, go, hey man, throw the flag up. What is this thing you're doing? Because it's got nothing to do with that. That means we're off in a rabbit hole somewhere. Right? So that works out pretty well. Now, how do you turn that into decision making? How do you use your priorities, whether they be personal or your organization, into some sort of decision making process? And here's how it really works. At the baseline leadership, out in the troops in the field, the firefighters, when they are making decisions and solving problems, it's usually a cultural based thing. They're going to operate based on the culture that they understand, that they're used to. That's how they're going to solve the thing. If two firefighters are sitting there and they're like the guy with the ball, you know, that was largely a cultural thing that caused him to, his values kicked in and he had to do something with that. When you go up to the lieutenant captain level, now you're getting into the application of policy and procedure. They have tools to make decisions with. And they get most of them. Most of that stuff gets handled there, at least it should. You know, that's where we're trying to get the decision making to happen, is at the lieutenant and captain level. Anytime I have a lieutenant, I've had it more than a handful of times where they have said, we need a policy on, you know, whatever it is, like what time the TV can be on. They want a policy on when the television can be on or off. I was like, why? Why do you need that? Well, we're having some problems with it around the firehouse, and if we had a policy on it, that would help us make sure we're getting the work done. Like, why do you need me to write a policy on it? Well, you know, they're going to give me a hard time about it if I say, yeah, but we're paying you the big bucks, man. You know, you're the boss. When the TV can be on when the boss says it can be on. That's the way it's supposed to work. You don't need me to write a policy on that. Because then I can't foresee every time that the TV should or shouldn't be on. You know, I don't know. Y'all fix it, man. You know, that's your thing. That's a company officer silly problem almost, you know. Now, the people might not like it, but you're not there to be a buddy. You're there to be the boss. So be the boss. So do what works for you, you know, and go from there. Like I said, I've never really written a good policy. I don't like to write them. So what about executives, the chiefs? In our case, we go from battalion chief to assistant chief to fire chief. So the assistant chiefs, there's 3 of us in the fire chief, the 4 stooges we call us. How do we solve problems? Because once the problem gets to us, it's gone from it didn't get a cultural solution, it didn't get a policy or procedure solution. When it gets to us, what do we use to solve it? Values. There's no right or wrong. I mean, if it was a right or wrong answer, somebody would have fixed it already. By the time it gets to you, there kind of isn't a right answer. You got to figure out what's the best answer. You know, what answer is going to work best to fit with our values and what we believe? And those are difficult things to do. I mean, none of them are easy usually. But we've got a little tool that we use. We look at three things in the scope of values: political, tactical, and financial. Our chief cooked this up, and it's a pretty interesting little tool that we use to solve it. The priorities are typically going to fall into three categories. They're political, tactical, or financial. And it looks like that. That's my little scribble. So no matter what it is that you're trying to figure out that you want to do as an organization, one of these is going to be the dominant factor: political, financial, and tactical. So I'll give you an example. Just real quick, I'll give you an example. How about European fire helmets? That's usually something that gets everybody spun up like in a hot second. Right? These European fire helmets, there's people in the department that want to use them and implement them. There's a few. But what does the rest of the department think? Hell no, they don't want to be, they don't want to wear that thing. So what would be, looking at this, how would you solve that? Is it a political, tactical, or financial? Is it a tactical thing? Is it tactical dominant? If you knew what they actually could do, that you might say they're actually pretty high speed. When you integrate the face piece and the communications into them, they're badass. I mean, if I'm wearing one of those with the face piece integration, I will take your nozzle. Trust me, I'll be that quick. You be as fast as you want to be with your traditional helmet and mask, but I'm going to have the nozzle. I'll be gone. Those things clip in like fighter pilot mask things. Click, gone. I mean, you're out of there. It's quick, but nobody knows that. So tactically, probably not a dominant thing. Is it a financial dominant issue? Now, they're actually cheaper than the other ones. The face piece integration is a problem in the United States because they won't sell it to us yet. But you can get them everywhere else. That ought to tell you something too. Right? If the rest of the world is using them but we can't, wait a minute. What do we not know, right? So, and then how about, is it a political dominant question? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now, I know there'd be a better tactical choice, but that's not the dominant factor for us. It's a political one. And until I can integrate the face piece, I'm not going to do it. That's the thing, because they won't like it. It won't work. It won't have the effect that we want unless we get the SCBA integration. We get that, we're going to jump on it. And they'll hate it at first, and they'll cuss me for it again. But once they get a couple of reps in a fire, they'll be like, oh, yeah. They'll be, my buddy, I got to use one in Europe. And we were joking. I hated to give it back. We were burning there for a week, and I'm like, I got to give this back to you now, but man, my leather helmet is stupid. Looks good. He goes, yeah, we got a leather helmet here. I'm like, you do? Where? He goes, it's in a glass case in the lobby. You can go see it if you want. But they're using completely different technology than we are. But so that's going to be a political dominant problem to solve. So what's cool about that is, we don't have time to run a bunch of scenarios, but it starts with a wheel and you just figure it out. But when we go into a firehouse, what I think is cool, and I know we're making a difference culturally with our folks, is I'll walk in a firehouse and look on the whiteboard and I'll see the pie. So you know what that tells me? They were working something. They were figuring something out. We've told them this is how we solve problems. We have 4 priorities, and we use that filter of political, financial, and tactical to figure it out based on our values. And they know how we think. So they probably have already come to the answer that they figured we would probably come to, and maybe they'll bring it forward, or maybe they won't. They might go, this ain't gonna work, and just maybe it dies there, or maybe it comes forward. But what we've noticed is the projects and ideas that do come up the chain are usually well thought out and well put together, because they already know what we're going to do. We're fairly predictable. So that's the three things. Be a leader of yourself. First thing, assume command. Go out of here today. You're in charge. Run your size up. What do you need to work on in the next short time period? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you learn from other people? What lessons can you pick up out of history? Look all around, man. There's mentors everywhere. You don't need mentoring programs are great, but you don't have to have one. You can get all the mentors you want, just by paying attention. And then take it from there. Lead all those things to a better you. So that's your mission for the day. Please take care of yourself and your family. This is difficult work. We're only starting to understand how difficult it really is. Between all the impacts that we've, whether it be the medical issues we're having with cancer and all the other stuff, and then the behavioral, trying to stay healthy from a mental perspective is difficult these days. We've had a lot of people retire because they just couldn't anymore. Particularly after we had a line of duty deaths, so that's been rough. We had several really, really good firefighters just go, I just can't, I gotta go. They're selling real estate or something, and luckily everybody's still hanging on, doing okay. But take care of yourself and your family and take care of your people. That's the biggest thing that I can see. I've had 3 great fire chiefs in my career, and they all were the right guy at the right time, and all of them have common traits. They're very transparent, ultra approachable. They'll tell you when they make a mistake. The worst thing you can do in our organization is tell a lie. You can screw up all day, because we all have. And many times our executive staff, we've said, have we not ever done that? Because there's stuff we used to could do in '82 that you can't do right now, right? You can't do that anymore. So having some understanding of that, but still enforcing your values and holding people accountable to that. Is the brotherhood or sisterhood real? Yes, it is. I see it all the time. It should not be situational. So you will go out of here and face the world, and maybe some guy in a white lab coat will ask you to push a button. And when that comes up, in whatever circumstance or context it might be in, just remember what you believe in. All right? We're brothers and sisters here. Thank y'all. Thanks for having me out. It's been an awesome conference. Absolute blast. I hope to see you soon.